Hello and welcome. This is Valerie Hurtado, and on today's podcast, we'll be discussing the topic of anti-feminism, the rise of the Red Pill Society and its implications. So, first and foremost, what exactly is anti-feminism, and what connection does it have to the Red Pill movement? Merriam-Webster defines feminism as the belief in and advocacy for political, economic, and social equality of the sexes, expressed especially through organized activity on behalf of women's rights and interests. As you can imagine, anti-feminism is just the opposite. In the late 19th century, as well as in the early 20th centuries, anti-feminists opposed policies for women's rights such as the right to vote, access to education, property rights, as well as the access to birth control, amongst others. Currently, many anti-feminists perceive that their ideology is actually a response to misandry, or the hatred or prejudice against men and boys. This opposition to the feminist ideals of equality and social equity amongst the sexes has many variations to it, the most notable of which currently is the Red Pill movement. This is an ideological metaphor whose name is derived from the movie The Matrix, and it has many subsets of its own, which we will cover later on in the podcast. Community psychology itself has been developed worldwide to address issues of injustice and oppression, constantly working towards social justice, equality, and the overall well-being of individuals within a society. Community psychologists strive to promote positive change, and they address issues affecting our communities. As such, we thought it very important to address this issue because it's one that directly or indirectly affects us all. The power struggle between the sexes has long been much more than a simple topic of debate. It permeates our entire society, starting from the interpersonal relationships between men and women, to politics, education, etc., etc., coloring the perspectives of our youngest and perpetuating a cycle of misunderstanding and oftentimes also contempt for that which is different. Because of the massive presence of this issue in each and every one of our lives, and simultaneously, the tremendous impact that may arise from a positive change, it's become a topic of great interest to us. Delaney Biro and Krystal will walk us through a more detailed look at the red pill, as well as the feminist viewpoints and their effects on our society, followed by Genesis Borges and Barbara Rodriguez-Marrero, who will take a deeper dive into the topics within the red pill, like the manosphere, the notable Andrew Tate, and incel, concluding with alternatives to these anti-feminist ideologies. At the end of our podcast, please join us for a conversation where we each discuss our viewpoints on the topic, as well as some of our personal experiences with it. Thank you, and now please welcome Delaney Biro and Krystal Alvarez.
Hi everyone, it's Delaney Biro.
And I'm Krystal Alvarez.
Krystal and I were talking the other day about the different viewpoints with the red pill and feminism and how they differ and pretty much the rise of it. We found some pretty interesting information regarding this. To start this off, I was going to talk a little bit about the red pill and what that means. So the red pill is a metaphor which people found and talked about a lot. They borrowed the metaphor from the film The Matrix, which was a very popular film in the late 90s and the early 2000s. The way people explained the red pill is that it was associated with adopting harmful ideologies. In this case, it would be like male supremacy or misogyny, and is often stated as, or like the sentence being like taking the red pill. So the red pill metaphor is usually paired with the blue pill metaphor, where in that case represents staying or remaining comfortable with the state of ignorance or accepting the mainstream narrative without questioning it or doing anything about it. Krystal, I remember you said you had researched a little bit about feminism. What is that? Can you explain that quickly?
Of course. So feminism reflects a history of different struggles that women have gone through. Feminism, also known as the women's movement, to put an end to sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression, but they are most known for wanting to achieve full gender equality. The movement is made up of women and men who work and fight to improve the lives of women as a social group. It started in North America when women were first allowed to go to school early, and learn how to read, write, and actually study and make a life for themselves. And since women were learning to read, they started speaking up about their rights. Back in time, the traditional ways for women were to be confined at home, just like their daughters, wives, and mothers. So also for the most part, women were famous only because men were or their husbands were, or even be noticed was because of men. So women were tired of being in the shadow of men and took action for change.
Oh, wow. So it seems like feminism and male supremacy are quite the opposite of terms.
Yes, like polar opposites. Like one is looking for unity and equality for both men and women versus the red pill is focused only on male point of views and having their own rights.
Yeah, I saw for many, many years the relationship between men and women were or have been nothing more than examples of antagonistic relationships. So the society has allowed that for the sexes of individuals to have major divisions. And for many years, women didn't have the right to vote, to work, or to own many things around, like you said. And now all of that is not to such a major extent, but they still fight every day. Women still fight every day for many rights that men have had for already so many years.
Yeah, like I also think that that's what power men want to achieve is like male domination. And I know it sounds like extreme and dramatic, but look up videos and documentaries and you will see many men like think this way. Like men like explicitly go and make videos and content about male domination. Like they want men to rule the world and not women. Um, this way of thinking is toxic to the new generation of men as well. Especially for them growing up, it just shows them that women are little and belittled every day, even with their rights and everything. Again, feminism is meant to bring everyone together and be one, not divided, or to be looked down upon for wanting to work, vote, and make lives of their own.
Yeah, and to focus a little bit more on the red pill, it does have some key themes. As I briefly talked about before, the male supremacy. Those who use the red pill often are used in a bias towards men in many ways, like social, legal, and romantic ways. I also saw that they talked about how they tend to argue with activists that are in the feminist community. Have you heard about any of that?
Yeah, I mean, arguments have been going on for years about male supremacy and feminism. This dilemma will always be there just because men are afraid of power, of losing their power, like taking it from them. They view feminism harmful to men and fearing loss of societal privileges or even being discriminated against, which leads them to be power men, power hungry men that don't let women achieve their goals, never wanting to give up their need for power over women and their rights, which is why they're always just against feminism. They're afraid of women taking over, and them being belittled and discriminated.
Yeah, I saw that a lot of people view like the red pill in some positive ways and some negative, like criticisms. Like some people can view it in some positive ways, like it increases the self-awareness of the male, or they're taking control of their life and finding what they believe, and also builds into the self-development. Um, and as also being a counter narrative of feminism, and also finding other values that they share with others around them. But some people I've heard also find this as a criticism. So um, the rejection of equality, having the victim mentality, and a big one is showing toxic masculinity, like promoting the harmful stereotypes for women or those who support feminist topics.
Yeah. Like I listen, with every support movement, it has its good and its bad. The red pill, if used in the right mindset, and positive light, I think people can achieve better versions of themselves without the toxic like masculinity or victim mindset, like you said. Just like in feminism, there are activists that use the term feminism to validate their own agendas and opinions, and like most forget the real reason why the women's movement was created. Like both topics have potential to be great and positive movements, but people actively choose to be divided instead of as one.
Yes, exactly. There are a lot of different points of views for this topic, and I think it would be something for everyone to kind of get a little bit of an more of an understanding for, and hopefully, we helped a little bit with introducing that topic.
Yes. To expand on what you guys were talking about earlier, Butter and I were talking about this new term that has been causing controversies in society. So let's talk about manosphere. It's this new online world of men's group that is gaining traction and it's pretty concerning. These groups are using the idea that men are naturally dominant, twisting biology and evolution to argue that strict gender roles are normal. They also refer to this idea as the male supremacy, which to them is a way of fixing society, but in reality is denying respect and rights for women and the LGBTQIA2S community.
It's not just harmful, it promotes such a narrow-minded idea of what it means to be a man. That limits men too.
Yes, and these opinions are getting more and more radical. I also found that the Canadian Security Intelligence Service even classifies violent misogyny as a form of ideological extremism now. And that's because the manosphere applies everyday biases to dangerous extremes.
It's definitely something we need to be paying closer attention to.
Yeah, and there are also many individuals who promote this idea, mostly through social media platforms and chat forums, engaging and promoting this misogynist perspective. And among these people is a famous and controversial influencer named Andrew Tate. He's a British American influencer who's built a massive following with over 6.9 million followers on Twitter alone. But here's the thing, he's also one of the most controversial figures out there.
Yeah, and for so many reasons. I've heard he's been charged with a slew of crimes and is banned from traveling to a lot of countries.
Yeah, he's been charged with rape, human trafficking, and forming an organized crime group to sexually exploit women. He spent over 7 months under house arrest and was released in August 2023, but he's still under movement restriction. And let's not forget, he's also wanted in the UK on allegations of sexual assault.
And he definitely doesn't shy away from controversy. I mean, he openly calls himself a misogynist. Who does that?
Agreed, in claiming that he's a realist and proclaiming that when someone is a realist, that person is sexist, because according to him, there's no way you can be rooted in reality and not be a sexist. He was even banned from Twitter at one point for saying that women should bear responsibility for being sexually assaulted.
I can't believe he actually believes what he says, let alone so many others. He's got millions of supporters, and a lot of them are young men who are drawn to his strong opinions of masculinity. Well, toxic masculinity.
Yeah, and that's because he talks about things like self-confidence, discipline, and financial independence, which resonate with people feeling disillusioned by modern societal changes.
And let's not forget, there's the lifestyle he promotes. If you follow his rhetoric, you too can have an ultra luxurious and extravagant lifestyle with money, women, and cars.
It can be aspirational for some, and he ties it all to this idea that escaping the matrix, but underneath that, he's promoting misogynist perspective and stirring up controversy around the feminist movement.
It is a dangerous combination of ideas.
Absolutely, because he's offering a distorted vision of masculinity that's not just harmful to women, but also traps men in harmful gender roles.
Sadly, there's a lack of real movement that's run by men for men to help address social issues that affect men without making women the enemy and resorting to this picture of every feminist being a domineering woman.
Yeah. Now, I know that there's other more specific areas to the manosphere. Have you heard of them?
Yes, the subgroup within the manosphere that's deemed the most concerning are called incels.
Wait, incels? I've heard of that. What is that?
Well, incel is actually a blended term of involuntary celibate, describing someone, usually a male, who's frustrated by their lack of sexual experiences. The Anti-Defamation League, which works to address hate and extremism, defines incels as heterosexual men who blame women and society for their lack of romantic success. The term incel comes up frequently in discussions around gender, misogyny, violence, and extremism.
So how do incels see themselves? Is this whole manosphere ideology?
Ironically, while incels view themselves at the bottom of their hierarchy, they consider all men, including themselves, superior to women. Based on that, we can see that the incel ideology is a supremacist one.
Like white supremacy?
Well, while white supremacy is the most common and lethal example of a mindset, the logic and hierarchies presented that they are common in all forms of supremacist ideology, particularly how they dehumanize the other while simultaneously arguing that they cause suffering to the in group. Do you want to hear something ironic?
Sure.
The person credited with coining the term incel was actually a woman.
Wait, what?
Yep, she's only known by her first name, Alana. She first popularized the term in the 1990s through a personal website called Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project.
Okay, so she was a woman who was anti-feminist?
No, not at all. The term incel was just part of the language she used with her followers as they discussed feelings of shyness and social awkwardness while dating and interacting socially. But apparently, we can't have nice things. And the term spread and took on different meanings. As with any term of identity, the definition lies in how the person uses it to describe themselves and others.
So what are some of the things that incels believe?
Well, a 2022 study online outlined some ideologies that tie incel communities together: an appearance-based hierarchy, in which how one looks is considered the most essential key to both sexual relationships and one's place in society; a belief in female hypergamy, the notion that women are too sexually selective and use their privilege and sexuality for social advancement above else; and a dislike of feminism. As it was, feminism that promoted and encouraged women to have a deserved right to sexual agency. There has been such discussion in incel forums dedicated to the reversal of gender equity. Many of the proposed solutions involve some form of coercion, rape, or a complete return to enforced monogamy under a strict patriarchal rule, that study stated.
So what are some things you think we should know?
Well, as with every tight-knit group, there are words that have specific meaning just to them. For example, in the incel community, a Chad, it's used to refer to all the attractive masculine men that incels perceive at the top of the male social hierarchy. Then there's the Stacys, attractive women atop the female social hierarchy. These women are to be both desired and scorned. As in incel culture, attractive women are the reason for their sexual failures. Then there's the normies. These are those that have average attractiveness and intelligence, which is the majority of the group, and then looks maxing. So some group of incels are less concerned with this perceived social and political reasons for their situation. They actually focus, whether positively or negatively, on their own perceived flaws. They try getting as attractive as they can, either through grooming, style, or exercise.
So is inceldom related to the far right?
Well, there does appear to be some link between the incel movement and the broader far right, but the exact nature of this relationship is yet to be examined empirically. Firstly, we've seen that there are ideological overlaps between some aspects of far right ideology and that of incels, particularly in their use of hateful language. For example, Elliot Rodgers' manifesto, and we'll get into him in a minute, made ample use of racially charged language. Second, both communities often exhibit similar online sensibilities regarding their use of memes and the notion of pilling, etc. And third, some have even posited that parts of the far right are preying on the insecurities of some of these young, impressionable men and using their anti-female supremacist views as a gateway to lure them into forms of white supremacy. But again, it's yet to be tested.
This is just getting more and more concerning.
You have no idea. Some have even used the legal system to address their perceived discrimination.
They filed lawsuits against who?
Well, in the late 2000s, there was an activist and lawyer, Roy Don Helander. He filed a series of unsuccessful lawsuits concerning the 14th Amendment. The first suit, Hollander versus the Copacabana nightclub, was filed against 6 bars and nightclubs in New York that offered complimentary access to women on certain days or at certain times. The second one, Hollander versus Michael Chertoff, targeted the wording of the Violence Against Women Act as being insensitive to intimate partner violence committed against men. The suit also claimed that the act allowed wealthy foreign-born women to gain citizenship by marrying American men and then claiming sexual assault, resulting in divorce with retained citizenship. And the third suit, Hollander versus the Institute for Research on Women and Gender at Columbia University, was against Columbia University centering on the existence of their Women's and Gender Studies program, which claimed that the program discriminated against men because no other similar program existed to address men's issues.
Is he still trying to use the legal system to push incel ideology?
Actually, Hollander was suspected of murdering the family of a U.S. District Court judge, as well as a lawyer and leader of the National Coalition for Men. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound shortly after the attack on the judge's family.
This type of negative and extreme mindset can possibly be good for the followers' mental health.
Not at all. There are so many negative outcomes with this mindset. The mental health issues, the isolation, the bitterness, and the misogynistic thinking that often categorizes incel culture can lead incels to align themselves with increasingly extreme beliefs.
Okay, so what type of incidents have we seen that are aligned with this belief system?
Over the past 10 years or so, several incidences of mass violence have been perpetrated by men who identified themselves as incels or publicized their beliefs in male supremacy. So in 2014, Elliot Rodger went on a stabbing and shooting rampage in Isla Vista, California. He was a self-described incel. After the attack, which killed 6, injured more than a dozen, and ended with a 22-year-old's death at his own hands, Rodgers became a celebrity, inspiration, and a meme among incel communities.
Whoa, 22 years old, and this is not his legacy?
Sadly, yes, and there are others. In 2020, Armando Hernandez drove to the Westgate Entertainment District near Phoenix. He loaded 3 30-round magazines in his AR-15 rifle and started a video live stream as he stepped out of his car. "Let's get this done, guys," he said to his followers. By the time police apprehended Hernandez, he had shot 3 people, none fatally, thankfully. Prosecutors say that he targeted couples because he was angry at his lack of romantic success with women.
I'm wondering how he thought that was going to end.
I really wish I could tell you, but less than a month later, there was yet another one. Cole Carini appeared in a Virginia emergency room missing a hand, several fingers from his other hand, and was covered in shrapnel wounds. Investigators found bomb-making materials and a letter describing a young man who gets to a mall to target hot cheerleaders with deadly objects. The letter read in part, "I will not back down. I will not be afraid of the consequences no matter what. I will be heroic. I will make a statement like Elliot Rodgers did."
And that's the name. It really was his legacy. Does this happen anywhere else, or is only here in the US?
Sadly, other incidents also show that incel behavior and its violent consequences aren't limited to the US. The man behind the 2021 van attack in Toronto that killed 10 spoke of incel rebellion to overthrow the Chads and Stacys. And guess what, Genesis? He also called Elliot Rodger the supreme gentleman.
I guess they really are redefining words, aren't they? Anywhere else?
A man who killed 5 during a shooting rampage in Plymouth, England in 2021 expressed solidarity with incel culture and had a fascination with violent men. His digital footprint on his platforms contains numerous examples of misogynistic and anti-feminist attitudes, as well as references to the incel subculture. Although some of his most recent posts seem to imply that he was trying to disengage with the incel subculture due to its perceived impact on his mental health. The current evidence indicates that his engagement with his ideology had a significant role in shaping his worldviews.
Do you think this is a new phenomenon?
Actually, the label incel was attached retroactively to Marc Lepine, who in 1989 massacred 14 women at École Polytechnique in Montreal and left behind a suicide note in which he blamed feminists for destroying his life. Since then, angry young men have taken up his cause, leaving women terrorized and all too often dead.
Have you come across any information of how these incidents are being investigated?
Well, the U.S. Secret Service's National Threat Assessment Center said in 2020 it would further investigate incel ideologies while citing the 2018 case of a 40-year-old man who attacked a hot yoga studio here in Tallahassee, Florida, killing 2 women and injuring 4 others before shooting himself, stating that the body of research examining misogyny as an extreme ideology and incel specifically, as well as the intersection with other ideologies like white supremacy as a field of research, is growing.
So going back to mental health, what kind of issues are we seeing in this men?
Well, psychologists observe that incel culture can also be very dangerous to the very men who find comfort in it. A 2022 study surveyed a sample of self-described incels. Researchers found that 75% of the incels they questioned were clinically diagnosable with severe or moderate depression and 45% with severe anxiety. They went on to state that they are also, as a group, particularly averse to seeking help from mental health professions. Another 2022 study found that those identified as incels were more likely to experience higher rates of paranoia and negative thoughts about their relationships with others in general, not just women. The lead author of that study stated that incel people struggle with their condition and they feel that women are responsible for that. They are suffering, but incapable of changing their situation, so they blame others. The violence comes from there, from resentment. Once again, emotional education and psychological counseling should be promoted in schools as preventative programs.
That was actually my next question. So what are the ways we move away from this negative and harmful ideology?
There are opinions that believe that a portion of the members of the Red Pill movement are as a result of a lot of young men who are anxious about their future, who are feeling that protections are being afforded to other groups, such as women, ethnic minorities, transgender people, etc., that aren't being afforded to them, where evening the field is actually tilting it completely in the other direction. There are some studies that show working class boys are facing an uphill battle to do well in school, and that's partially as a result of the way that the education system isn't designed with their interest in mind, and that men who are sexually abused find it difficult to speak out, especially if they are abused by a woman.
So what do you think is needed?
Well, a movement to think about the way that society thinks about gender and how it negatively affects men could be a really helpful one. Men's group that support men, including young men, that advocate for men's rights in its own way without following this controversial misogynistic approach, an idea about gender roles, aiming to build, teach, and equip men with knowledge and guidance to help them through various issues they face, like divorce, child custody, etc. A lot of the claims that men's right activists make are true and important. There is a mental health crisis among men that is largely a result of widespread belief that men should be stoic and indomitable. There are also some feminist groups who are currently trying to study and explore how the patriarchy can be detrimental to both men and women.
Great. These ideas sound like a good starting point. Progress and equality shouldn't be something that we are using as a negative. There's many ways to promote personal ideologies in a non-toxic fashion, so we shouldn't have to dehumanize a portion of the population in order to claim success.
That was awesome, ladies. I feel like the biggest issue between feminism and anti-feminism and the red pill and all of that is that you are drawing differences and you're pitting people against each other. It shouldn't even be a I'm on the left, I'm on the right, I'm whatever the case may be. You have to be striving for equanimity. And that's what makes this red pill ideology so attractive to young men. I mean, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like, like I said before, like, it's just, I think being together is what's important, and I think it gets lost within everyone's like personal like dilemma like throughout their life, because again, everyone goes through different things. No one goes through the same thing. So I think people read, like you said, like young men in the generation, like they grow up maybe feeling a certain way about themselves, and then they go to find someone to look like a role model to look for, and they find someone like Andrew Tate, and they like adapt that mentality, and then I think that's where it just like affects everyone, and it just turns into a negative thing versus it being like a positive thing. Everything can have a positive outcome as long as you have that mindset of being positive. You know what I mean?
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I agree. Instead of looking at it as when we have female empowerment and we have a more balance of power, instead of looking at us taking something away from them, it should be us just becoming equal. We're not taking anything away, we're adding to ourselves. We're no longer property, we're no longer put in our place. We have a voice, we're allowed to move forward, we're allowed to have opinions, and we're allowed to be just as strong. But with the balance of power comes that whole shift of medical advancement, female empowerment, economic independence, which means now we actually get to choose not only what we want to do, but who we want to be with and the kind of lives we want to lead. And that's not dictated by anybody but ourselves.
Agreed. Even in the dating sphere, thinking, because I do see the allure of the red pill movement, because these young boys, a lot of them are growing up without positive male figures in their lives. So they're just trying to figure out what'll work. And they see this flashy guy with all these cars and all these girls, and they think, well, maybe I should do something like that. And you look at traditional gender roles and you think, well, grandma and grandpa, it did fine for them, but just it only really worked because it was complementary, but it doesn't necessarily mean anybody was happy or they felt like they had value in that relationship. They might have just been together, especially when you look at older couples sometimes, just because that was the status quo and it worked. So it'll put you into that thought of, well, they lasted for like 50 years together, but was that necessarily good for them, for their mental health? And that's something that we have to look into as a society. What do we actually want out of this?
Yeah, that's also true. Like, and it in the dating aspect, like, I feel like also like as a Hispanic woman, like a lot of the gender roles, I think in the Hispanic community is like the man has to be the provider, and I don't think it's just Hispanic. I think overall a lot of people have that ideology. It's like the men have to provide. So, and I think that's what's also like from past, like like she said, like like couples from before, that gets passed down from generation, like, oh, when you're a boy, like, oh, you need to provide, you need to do this. And I feel like that also adds to that mentality, like, oh, you need to do this, you need to be a man, you need to do all this, and again, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, if that's something that you want to do as a man, you want to provide, like, it's fine. I just think a lot of them take it way too far, and start to be like, oh, like, my wife has to be at home and clean and do this and do that. And I think that's where the issues, like, just turns. You know what I mean?
Right. Because there's too much black and white. We live in a world of gray.
Yeah.
So there is not one right way to do things. There's a way that works for the people that are involved.
Mhm.
Because
In
think
part,
about it, even in work environments, right? So I've done my entire career working in male dominated fields. So I started my career very young and I worked at a prison. I was 19 working at a male prison. I was not the most welcome human in that environment. Even the warden had issues with me working there just because I was female. Forget what my capacities were, forget whether or not I could do the job, forget anything that actually got me hired to work there. It was just the fact that I was a female walking in the door, and there was no way that I was going to be able to manage working with men in a prison setting. I was going to be weak. I was going to be taken advantage of. All of these negative things were going to happen just because I was born female. And
Yeah.
then it transfers over it through everything in a male dominated career path.
Yeah, and I feel like that, like in the workplace, that happens a lot. And also, like, just like everyone said, like in the relationship status, like they all feel like they need to be empowered in like every aspect of a woman's life, or and it's just like sometimes viewed as a very negative thing. Like for women, even some men think it's very negative. So it's like a very difficult situation when you try to make, like, a woman tries to make a image of themselves, and they get put down constantly because of their gender, and like because of their dreams, and what they want to do in the future. So yeah, it gets quite complicated.
Well, one of the things that Genesis and I were discussing is you shouldn't have to step on someone in order to get to your next level. Like, we're not stepping stones as humans, right? We should be able to help each other regardless of gender, regardless of anything, in order to be the best version of ourselves.
It's important the way we raise our kids. Well, we are the future generation. And for example, me being born and raised in South America, the way I was raised is to be a housewife, a mother. My toys as a girl, it was a baby, it was a kitchen, it was all this set of norms that you're raised with in order to become the stereotype of female in the traditional norms for Hispanic culture. And I think we can begin by making a change in the way we raise our daughters. For example, at my house, it's mostly after dinner, it's the woman who pick up the dishes, they wash the dishes, they cook, they do all this type of things while the their father or my brother, they just stay at the table and they don't help. So making this like little changes can help improve this equality in the future for our children, for future generations.
No, that's a really good point. And I think, just like I think having this mindset, I think as counselors, for like psychology, so when it's applied in the community, you take into account that like people are going through that, like what Genesis said, it's like you go into a household and you can tell who has the gender role just by like behavior and obviously information that you pick up, who does everything, who has like which role. And I think most of the time, especially in a Hispanic household, you can kind of know that like that's what you're gonna run into a lot, is a lot of um like gender roles like that. And I don't think it should be that way. I think women should have the choice to be like, well, I want to go work, or I don't want to do the dishes today because I have to because I'm a woman. I think it should be equaled out.
With what Krystal was saying about like the community and like being a counselor, like um knowing and understanding like the red pill, the feminism, the male supremacy, all these things could help us kind of communicate with our clients, whether it's one or the other. Like we have like that opportunity to kind of not push our opinions onto them, but kind of make them realize that there's more than just what they believe in. Not specifically what we believe in, but kind of just like there's other people around here that has different opinions, whether they're having relationship issues or something along those lines. Like you have that ability to be able to explain to them like, hey, your relationships might not be working because you're thinking this way and other people think this way. So I think Krystal brings up a really good point with what she just said.
Yeah, absolutely. And another aspect of just the mental health issues that we face now, just like Genesis brought up, that we need to pay attention to how we're raising our little girls, also our little boys, who are essentially this whole red pill movement. It's, even though it has all these negative things coming out of it, it's almost like a cry for help, because then there's an issue here. There's a vacuum of, well, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? What is my role model supposed to be? How do I fit into this? Because I can't cry, I can't be sad, I can't vent. And then the suicide rates for males are so much higher because they're taught that they have to be stoic all the time and they can only really be angry or just quiet all the time. So we also have to pay attention to how we're raising our little boys. I mean,
Absolutely.
like you said, the patriarchy is not just bad for females in the society, it's also bad for boys and men in our society. So
Right. There is no safe space for a man that has like open emotions. And we have to create a safe space for everybody to be vulnerable, to be strong, to be any version of themselves that they can be. We are seeing, unfortunately, an uptake in mental health concerns, depression, anxiety, suicidality, because the coping mechanisms aren't there, because we have to hide how we feel. We have to hide our reactions. We can't be as truthful or as honest because it's immediate pushback. So it's always, again, a black and white thing. There's either immediate support for someone who's going through something, or they're making fun of that person because they're being too soft.
Yeah, it's like you don't really know. Like I think that's what really sucks about the situation. It's like I think men just go to the male supremacy just because they don't know, and like I think they rather, as a man, I think they just rather be in like a dominated type of mindset versus a weak one, like being soft, because I think that happens to most men. Like they think, oh, I can't be soft. Like it's not that, oh, I want to. It's like they can't. Like they can't do it. It's something that they can't cross. So they rather be just like Andrew Tate, very tunnel vision. Hey, I need this, like this, like this, like this. Like, women are just I exploit them. Money is, money is all it is, and cars and shiny things. And it sucks that there's not a lot more that people can do and support them. And I think as counselors, I think now, as the new generation of like counselors, I feel like that should be a very big priority. Like little boys growing up having a hard time communicating, or like young men, that should be, I think, in my opinion, a really big priority. So,
So that's definitely one of the things that I agree upon. I believe that a lack of communication skills is a huge problem in this day and age, in addition to the lack of coping skills. We don't know, not we like us, but in general, right? The population doesn't know how to process certain things, how to react to certain things, how to communicate, having a normal conversation without anger. We can see in our own political environment, right? You're not allowed to have an opinion without somebody telling you that you're stupid, that you're wrong. Everything that you say is the opposite, right? It immediately instigates a fight and not a conversation. So we're skipping, like we're going, instead of starting with communication and going into debate, we always start at debate. And debate isn't even debating anymore. It's fighting. It's legitimately fighting and telling someone, and just calling them names, because you're not actually debating the topic anymore. You want to make the other person feel bad. And that's how you put your point across.
Exactly. And the root seems to be a lot of fear. Fear of where do I fit in this world? And fear of, well, if women all of a sudden have all this power, then where does that leave me? Are they going to take my power next? And that shouldn't be a thought. It should be more so, well, I don't have to worry about who I have to be, but who I want to be. And these
Right.
sweeping statements that men and women throw at each other are part of the issue, because it becomes an us versus them. And if I think I'm right, then somebody has to be wrong. So we need to look for a way that we can fight for, not even fight for, because even the statement promotes violence. We need to find a balance where everyone gets their needs met.
No, absolutely. I don't want to take your seat at the table. I just want to have one.
Exactly.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk.